I survived. A terrifying bus ride. The rain hammered against the bus windows, a relentless drumbeat that echoed the pounding of my heart. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind that seemed to come straight out of a Gothic novel. I was on a late-night bus, heading back to my small hometown after a grueling week of work in the city. The bus was nearly empty, just a few scattered passengers, most of whom were dozing off or staring vacantly into the darkness outside. I was seated near the back, my eyes heavy with exhaustion but too wired to sleep. The dim overhead lights flickered occasionally, casting eerie shadows that danced along the aisle. The bus driver, a burly man with a weathered face, seemed unaffected by the storm. His eyes focused intently on the road ahead. As the bus trundled along the winding, desolate highway, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was an intangible sensation, a creeping unease that prickled at the back of my neck. I tried to tell myself it was just the storm, the isolation of the late hour playing tricks on my mind. The bus shuddered as it hit a pothole, jolting me in my seat. I glanced around, noting the other passengers. A young couple sat a few rows ahead, huddled together and whispering. An old man with a cane dozed near the front, his head bobbing with each bump in the road. A woman in a business suit tapped away on her laptop, her face illuminated by the screen's cold glow. There was also a man in a hooded jacket sitting across the aisle from me, his face obscured by the shadows. The bus made a sudden, sharp turn and I was thrown against the window. As I righted myself, I noticed something strange. The rain outside had intensified, but it wasn't just the rain. There were figures in the darkness, pale and ghostly, darting past the bus. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was seeing things, but when I looked again, they were still there, spectral shapes flitting through the storm. My heart raced, and I looked around to see if anyone else had noticed. The young couple were still engrossed in their conversation. The old man snored softly, and the woman with the laptop showed no signs of alarm. The hooded man, however, was staring directly at me. His eyes were dark and piercing, a smirk playing on his lips. I quickly averted my gaze, a shiver running down my spine. I tried to distract myself, pulling out my phone to check for messages, but there was no signal. Typical, I thought, cursing my luck. Minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. The bus rumbled on, the driver unperturbed by the worsening weather. The figures outside grew more distinct, their features becoming clearer with each passing moment. They were not human. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, their mouths twisted into grotesque grins. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, intending to go to the driver and demand an explanation. As I moved down the aisle, the hooded man stood up as well, blocking my path. His grin widened, and he reached into his jacket. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice a low, menacing growl. "I need to talk to the driver," I stammered, my voice trembling. "Sit down," he commanded, his hand emerging from his jacket clutching a gleaming knife. Panic surged through me, but before I could react, the bus lurched violently, sending both of us crashing to the floor. The lights flickered and then went out completely, plunging the bus into darkness. I heard screams, the sounds of a struggle, and then silence. When the lights came back on, the hooded man was gone. The knife lay on the floor, stained with blood. I looked around in horror. The young couple were slumped in their seats, their throats slit. The old man lay motionless, a look of terror frozen on his face. The woman with the laptop was gone, her seat empty. I stumbled to the front of the bus, my mind racing. The driver was still there, but his eyes were vacant, his skin pale. He was dead, a deep gash across his neck. The bus was moving on its own, the wheel turning by some unseen force. I grabbed the radio, desperately trying to call for help, but all I got was static. The figures outside the bus were closer now, their faces pressed against the windows. They were laughing, their eyes filled with malice. I had to get off the bus. I ran to the back, fumbling with the emergency exit. Just as I managed to pry it open, a hand grabbed my ankle. I kicked out, breaking free, and tumbled out into the storm. The rain was icy, soaking me to the bone as I scrambled to my feet. The bus roared away, disappearing into the night. I was alone on the highway, the figures now surrounding me. They advanced slowly, their laughter echoing in the wind. I backed away, my mind frantically searching for an escape. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance. A car was approaching, its engine a lifeline in the darkness. I waved my arms, screaming for help. The car slowed, and as it drew closer, I saw the driver's face. It was the woman from the bus, her eyes wide with fear. "Get in!" she shouted, flinging the door open. I didn't hesitate. I dove into the passenger seat, slamming the door behind me. The woman floored the gas pedal and we sped away, the figures fading into the distance. "What happened?" she asked, her voice shaking. "What were those things?" "I don't know," I replied, still trying to catch my breath. "But we need to get out of here." We drove for what felt like hours, the storm gradually easing. The woman, whose name was Sarah, explained that she had seen the hooded man attacking the other passengers and had managed to escape during the chaos. We were both in shock, struggling to comprehend the nightmare we had just experienced. As dawn broke, we finally reached a small town. We pulled into a gas station, both of us exhausted and shaken. The attendant gave us strange looks as we stumbled inside, drenched and disheveled. We called the police, who arrived quickly and took our statements. They found the bus later that day, abandoned on the side of the highway. There were no bodies, no blood, just an empty vehicle. The driver and the passengers were never found, their disappearance a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Sarah and I parted ways after that, each of us trying to move on from the horror we had endured. But the memories still haunt me. I can't shake the feeling that those figures are still out there, waiting in the darkness. Every time I see a bus, I feel a chill run down my spine. I haven't ridden one since that night, and I don't think I ever will again. The fear is too deep, the scars too fresh. I survived that terrifying bus ride, but a part of me was left behind, forever trapped in the storm. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear their laughter, echoing through the rain.